found my wife's obituary online, but she's sitting right next to me. I am chronically online. I Google lots of things and people when I'm bored. I've Googled my own name before, along with friends, acquaintances, conspiracy theories, and random internet summaries. But last night was the first time I'd Googled my wife's name, and I found something I'd never forget. The first hit was an obituary. Of course, I assumed it was someone with the same name as her. Her first name is Emily, and her last name is pretty common. Not going to share it here because I don't want to be doxxed. But I clicked it anyway, just out of curiosity. My heart fell through the floor when I saw a photo of my wife on the website. Blonde highlighted hair, dark eyes, and the dates matched up to 1986 to 2012. According to this obituary, she died when she was 26. I met her when she was 27. There's no way, I thought. This must just be someone who looks like her, with her name and her birth year. But I knew it was too many coincidences to be wrong. When I read the actual obituary, it only cemented things for me. It mentioned her love of horses, her volunteer work at a soup kitchen through her church, and her work as a biologist postdoc. So many details matched up, there was no way it could be a coincidence. What ya looking at? I jumped as my wife came in from the kitchen and sat down next to me. On instinct, I slammed the laptop shut. Nothing, I said. Then, realizing how suspicious I looked, I added, I was looking at birthday gifts for you. For a second, her face froze, and I was worried she wouldn't buy my lie. But then she smiled, that warm smile I loved, crinkling her eyes at the corners. That's so sweet, she said, coming to sit next to me. I swallowed. Yeah. She cuddled up next to me, but I felt completely on edge. The warmth of her skin no longer felt warm and inviting. In fact, a chill ran down my spine. After a few minutes, I extricated myself from her embrace. I don't feel good, I lied. I'm going to lie down. Okay, she said, pouting. Before she could say anything more, I ran upstairs. As soon as I got on the bed, I brought up the obituary again. I stared at the grainy image of her face. It was definitely her. That warm smile, those mysterious dark eyes. There was no way it could be anyone else. I scrolled through some of the other results, and I realized some of those too were related to her death. There was a Facebook memorial page. Friends posting on it, names I didn't recognize, mourning her loss more than 10 years ago. The university she worked at had put out a statement with their condolences as well. But then I found something that made my heart stop. A news article nestled at the bottom of the search results page. Emily hadn't just died. She'd been murdered. My jaw hung open as I read the news article. Phrases popped out at me. No signs of forced entry, partially dismembered, and killer still at large. The news article didn't have a photo of Emily though, so maybe this was a different Emily. It had to be. It couldn't be my Emily, who was sitting on the couch watching TV downstairs. A sound jolted me out of my thoughts. The door to the bedroom creaking open. Emily stood in the doorway, oddly still. The hall light was off, shrouding her face in shadow. Emily? I asked, my voice shaking. I came up to check on you, she said in a soft, cool voice. Thanks, I said, quickly turning off my phone and slipping it behind me. I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm fine. I'm glad to hear that, she said, her voice going lower. I tried to keep my cool as she climbed into bed with me. I lay there, stiff and cold, as she wrapped her arms around me. I love you, baby, she whispered, as she cuddled with me under the covers. I love you too. So that's where I am now. I'm writing this from my phone as Emily sleeps next to me. I don't know if I'm safe here. I don't know who or what I'm dealing with. All kinds of crazy scenarios have been floating through my mind. Did Emily have an identical twin that died, and she took over the twin's identity? Is she some horrible creature from folktales who killed Emily and took on her appearance? The more minutes that tick by, the wilder my theories get. None of them make sense. There's only one thing I'm sure of. Whoever or whatever I'm sleeping next to isn't the real Emily. 42. Has anyone else noticed the weird new trend where people in your peripheral vision play dead? I first saw it happen at work. I just finished ringing up a customer when every hair on my neck stood on end. Something in my peripheral vision caught my eye. I work at a board game store, and standing in an alcove peering at the game shelves was a skinny dude with a scraggly beard. His back was to me, but when he turned sideways, right at the edge of my vision, I could see his mouth was gaping wide open, like he was screaming. Weird, right? I glanced up, ready to laugh and ask him what was up, but the dude was just chilling, totally normal face. A slight wrinkle on his forehead, lips pursed as he read the back cover of Wingspan. He looked at me. Yo, I keep hearing about this. Is it any good? Slightly overrated in my opinion, I replied, but many people do seem to enjoy it. I'm trying to find a game my girlfriend might play. She's not really into board games and doesn't like competitive stuff. You have any good co-op games? Might I suggest a roll and write? Technically competitive, but you can't attack or interact with other players and mostly do your own thing on your board. They're also very beginner friendly. I turned to grab one of the reserved ones from behind the counter, and as I turned back around, I nearly jumped out of my skin because the man had approached so he was directly in front of the counter, and his mouth was wide open in a scream. Eyes wide, like he was a zombie about to bite me. But it must have been my imagination because as soon as I looked at him straight on, he just looked back at me, mouth quirked. You all right there, my dude? He asked. Cartographers is our top-selling roll and write. I stammered, recovering myself. But every time I took my eyes away from his face, in my periphery, he seemed to be like one of the undead, a corpse with a gaping mouth. I decided to ignore his behavior in the hope that he'd stop. He placed an order for cartographers, and I told him I'd give him a call when his copy came in. As I took down his details, much to my annoyance, he did not stop, but continued to stand in my periphery silently screaming. The next week, when I went in for a haircut, the guy sitting a couple of chairs over was also playing dead. He appeared to be slumped in the barber chair, head lolled to one side, blue eyes wide and unseeing. But the stylist kept flitting around him, scissors snipping, and when I turned to look at him directly, he was no longer playing dead, but instead speaking to the stylist, one hand gesturing from under the cape. Yet when I looked away a moment later, gone were his gestures. I could hear his voice, but he appeared to be lying motionless in his chair in the corner of my eye. Corpse. When my haircut was finished and I looked over again, he was gone from the chair. This just kept happening. Honestly, I thought it must be some sort of online fad with people randomly pretending to be dead. The internet has spawned stranger pranks. I don't have much of an online presence and don't keep up with popular memes or TikTok trends, and in my head, it made sense. It remained a relatively rare occurrence for me, and mostly happened in large crowds, for example, the airport. That was where I finally figured out the cause. I was on my way to visit family, going through airport security. A little farther behind me in line stood a young couple who were pretending to be corpses whenever I stopped looking at them. It was annoying, and I kept turning my head quickly, hoping to catch them in the act, but they were always behaving normally the moment I looked directly at them. And of course, what should have tipped me off is that no one else in the line was reacting to their behavior. Only I could see it. But at that point, I was still acting under the assumption that everyone else was in on some new TikTok prank, and I wasn't. I'm 42 and definitely give "how do you do" fellow kids vibes by today's social media standards. So anyway, I put my belongings on the conveyor belt, and the couple in my periphery were now 100% normal. Finally, I thought they stopped pretending, but the moment I collected my stuff and turned around, I nearly shrieked because both of them loomed next to me, standing slouched, faces contorted into death masks. You can't see sharp details in your periphery, but you can catch when someone is making a terrible dead face. But when I looked at them head-on to tell them to cut that shit out, they were both normal, staring at me like I was the weird one. The woman actually hid behind her partner. That's when I realized two things. One, that I was the source of the weirdness, and two, that more specifically the source was in my stuff. I felt around in my pockets, my fingers closed on cold metal, and that's when it all clicked for me. I found my father's pocket watch. Now, a little background on this watch. Dad gave it to me the day before he died. It's cracked and doesn't run. He'd had it for as long as I can remember, and when I was little, I asked him why he always carried a broken watch. He told me it was a family heirloom and that the cracks didn't matter because it told time in a different way. Those were his words. When he finally passed it down to me, he looked troubled as he told me, "I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse to be able to see the things it shows. My father told me to sell it, but I never could bring myself to." Dad was always very soft-spoken and polite. He ran an antique shop that closed after he died. I think he wanted me to run it, but I never had the passion or the interest. Our lives just took different paths. The watch is the one antique he made sure to give to me. What I'm still trying to figure out is why. Because as far as I can tell, there's no ambiguity about it. The damn thing is definitely cursed. See, once I knew the source was the watch, it all fell into place. At the end of that family trip, when I came back to work, I followed my hunch and looked up that guy who ordered the cartographer's game. He never came back to pick it up when it came in. I kept it sitting on the shelf for him, even though I should have just put it out on the main shelves for people to browse. It still had his name on it, and I searched his details and right away found his obituary from that same week he'd come into the store. So, that's what Dad meant about the watch telling time in a different way. If I'd known what was going on back when the customer ordered the game, I could have warned him. Could have let him know, "Hey bud, maybe grab something that's in stock currently. Better yet, forget the games, go do whatever it is you want to in your last hours of life. Start checking off that bucket list. Maybe buy something more meaningful, since it'll be your last chance to give your girlfriend a gift." But would he have listened? Looking back, I remember when I was a kid how things would happen with Dad that didn't make sense at the time. He'd get in random arguments with strangers. It was so uncharacteristic because my father wasn't a confrontational man, always polite. But once in a while, at the antique store, I remember he'd step outside with a customer, and the customer would leave upset, yelling or swearing or hysterically sobbing, sometimes leaving so quickly they'd forgot whatever it was they'd purchased. And once, too, at the mall, Dad was told to leave a store after upsetting an employee. Stuff like that. Now I realize he must have tried to warn people, but did it actually help those people? Any of them? Is the watch a blessing or a curse? The watch wasn't always cracked. Somebody cracked it, hurled it against a wall or the floor, maybe in a moment of frustration. Maybe my grandfather, but he didn't throw it away. He passed it to my dad. Now, I wish Dad had sold it. Wish he'd given it to someone else. I know it's not his fault. Everyone has their time. But there are some things that maybe people are just better off not knowing. And maybe Dad thought warning people was the right thing, but I'm team curse on this one. Knowing is definitely a curse. I'd rather not know. I should have thrown this watch away. But like my father and his father before, I just didn't. Now it's too late. I'm sitting here at home, and every time I pass the bathroom mirror, every time I catch a glimpse of my reflection at the edge of my vision, it's just too late to unsee my own dead eyes staring back at me. Okay guys, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a like. I would really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another video covering stories like this. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a good one.